Hi, my name's Random Tuesday, and in this video I'm going to walk you through my Evie Frye from Assassin's Creed Syndicate cosplay. The purpose of this video is to give you a little bit more resources and information about how I made this costume and kind of a visual guide of how the whole thing went together. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to leave those in the comment section below. You can also head over to my website, randomtuesday.net, for more resources, tutorials, and other information. There are links in the information section. This costume is constructed in a number of different layers, so we're going to start at the base and work our way out. The first layer is the undercoat. Now, I created this essentially as a vest without sleeves because I knew I was going to be wearing the full coat on the top. I didn't want the extra bulk, and I also didn't want the extra warmth, given I was going to be wearing it in the summer. So the first part, and again, to cut down on bulk and weight and heat, I, instead of creating a full shirt underneath, created a fake collar. This is really just one rectangle that sits around the shoulders, kind of across and in the front, and then a smaller rhombus that goes around the top. This is 2 layers of a sort of cream-colored cotton fabric with some interfacing to help that collar really stick up. And then it just snaps right here in the front using a pretty basic snap. And that gives it the collar that you can see without having to add all of the extra bulk underneath of a completed shirt. Next, over the top of that is my vest jacket. This is what attaches to the hood and also has that red scarf section that you can see in her reference images. This part I used my princess seam bodice pattern and then extended the lines down over the hips so you can see the seams that go over the bust, and in the back you can see the 2 seams that allow it to curve over the booty. In the front, instead of having just a straight line closure to create the cowl collar, I have a curved seam on both sides. It's symmetrical. This allows a little bit of extra fabric and volume in that front section. And it's lined with a faux lining because, again, bulk and weight and heat. I just have the lining right here on that center portion so that it's visible when it closes. The fabric that I used for this is a bottom weight fabric with a slight sateen finish to it. You don't necessarily need that, but I liked the texture that it gave. And then I used just some gray bias tape, slightly lighter gray, all the way around the edge to give it that border that the actual costume has. Now, to keep these 2 edges completely married together rather than installing a zipper, because I didn't need it to do up all the way, really just for a small portion under the bust, I used a hook and eye closure. The hooks and eyes also create the uneven seam that naturally it has at the bottom. Then, to create the cowl-neck look, I have this hook and eye closed over the top. So one side hooks underneath, and the other side hooks over the top. Because the fabric isn't stretched all the way, the excess just bunches, creating that cowl scarf look, and allows the lining to peek through. The final portion of this is the big old hood. I drafted just a basic hood pattern, and then I added the extra seam line so that I could add the bias tape all the way around. The embroidery on the front I did at the very end after it was all constructed. Rather than trying to replicate their pattern, I ended up with a sort of freehand Victorian filigree combined with eldritch runes, and I used a 3-dimensional puff paint to create that. And it goes from the front and then all the way to the back collar seam. This is just lined with the same lining fabric that you can see here and stitched directly. Again, because the lining doesn't go all the way around, I serged the inside edge to keep it neat. After the undercoat go all of our belting layers. So there are a few different pieces to that. The first one is the sash. Rather than having this sash go all the way around and tie in the back, because you were never going to see the back of it, I created essentially a rectangular piece of fabric with a slightly curved back seam just to accommodate for the waist, because it goes right around the waist. And then I actually stitched the pleats in place on the fabric, and it just velcros in the back. Saved me a little bit of bulk and allowed me to get a consistent look every time I wanted to wear it. So this goes underneath, and then next we have two separate belts. The first belt is a pretty basic one. I created these belts by taking pleather and folding it over some felt and hot gluing it in place. I then added some rivets to keep some of the thicker parts in place and small buckles that I got from a website called strapworks.com. The next belt is the Assassin's Creed symbol belt. So I created a non-functional buckle using some Worbla, as well as some finished with wood glue, painted with acrylic, and then some additional acrylic to provide some shading and detailing, and just some wire to create the hooks. Again, I used the same pleather wrapped around the felt to create the actual belt portion with some additional rivets to secure it. And this one, because I didn't want to bother making a functional belt, and again, the back is covered by the final jacket, it just snaps together at the back. Next up, we have the outer layer, the main jacket, which really is the bulk of this costume. The outer jacket has the most detailing and patterning on it, and I do have a pattern available both for the under jacket and the outer jacket available on my website, randomtuesday.net. There are links in the comments below. So let's go through the jacket. There are several fabrics involved, but let's start with the bodice portion, which is more or less the same on both sides. I have a black denim that I used, as well as a black flocked denim. If you do have access to a sewing machine, an embroidery sewing machine, you might be able to recreate the pattern that they use on it yourself. If not, there are a number of flocked denims that will give you similar fabric looks. There are some links again below. Then it closes with some snaps. So this bodice is based off of my princess seam pattern. I created a mock-up of it, drew all of the seam lines on it, and then replicated that in the actual fabric. There were a number of fitting processes and other testing that was involved in it, but the basics of it were pretty similar. I then figured out what fabric each part was going to need and made that fabric in the final version. Now, her actual jacket has what appears to be a lining of this sort of quilted pleather or leather on the inside. Again, reducing bulk and trying to keep it as slim a line as possible, I just put that lining right on the edge, so where it's visible on the jacket on both sides. So it's really a faux lining. The closure on this is actually only one functional snap. The remaining snaps on this side are actual snap ends, but they don't connect to anything on the other side, because naturally that makes the most sense. The sleeves are constructed of combinations of pleather, some chiffon ruffle, some ribbon, and again, that black denim. All of this was done using the same pattern where I made a muslin copy of a white sleeve pattern and drew all of the lines on it. I'm going to be making some future videos on my Sharpie patterning method, so stay tuned for those for anyone who wants some additional help to try and figure it out. The collar is just a nice big old rectangular collar that also has that same quilted lining that's sewn on at the end. All of my seams were covered using the bias tape to replicate the look that it has in the original version. I made each of these by casting or creating a master, casting it using flat back casting, which you can watch my video on as well. And I will have some of these available unpainted and unfinished on my Etsy store. In the back, we have our fake lacing. So when I created the back version, I added this little extra panel. Again, more decorative snaps. And here, these ones, I couldn't find black ones, so I painted these eyelets myself with nail polish, although there are black eyelets that are available online. And this is just a small piece of jewelry chain that I found. This piece then gets sewn on after the whole thing was put together, which is just a pleated piece of pleather. The side pieces here are just some fake lacing rather than trying to put that many eyelets in. It's just a mock version that I stitched the rat tail cord onto. The fabric that I used for all of the red portions on this cape is a peach skin satin, so it's kind of a matte satin with a slight sheen to it, but it has a very nice drape and flow to it. All of my things, all of the silver buttons are 1/2 of a snap. It does give it a jingle. There are now I have discovered rivets that you can get and studs that you can get that are just plain 1/2-inch circles without having to waste a whole bunch of snaps. The cape was made with a similar way to the actual jacket, where I made a mock-up of the cape, drew on all of the seam lines, and then transferred that to the actual fabric. So again, that combination of flocked denim, regular denim, and black pleather. These straps were done in the same sort of way as the belt. They're folded over and hot glued in place, and then I added the snap portions. One of these is functional, that does help it stay on the shoulder and not slip around or fall over. And this was sewn directly onto the seam right around the collar and the neckline because I didn't have any need for it to come on and off. The back cape uses that same peach skin satin, and I did an applique using a taffeta, red taffeta, which is the same one that you can see underneath the shoulder cape. It's a simplified version of what's on her actual cape in the game. Again, if you have a sewing machine that does embroidery, you might be able to replicate the same pattern that they had. And the bottom is just some brocade fabric that I created the edging in. The last piece of this costume is a handful of accessories that go with it. Instead of creating a pair of pants, I just wore some black jeans. I then made boot covers that went over a pair of heels that I had. So they have a little rubber pad so I can run around on them, a hole for the heel, and they just have a seam all the way up. So I made these by wrapping my leg in saran wrap, cutting it out, and flattening it in half so I would create this flattened boot cover pattern out of some brown pleather. You also need a pair of black gloves, and finally the hidden blade. So this portion, I cannibalized a costume, a prop version that is available from the Ubisoft store. I think I got mine at Target. And I cannibalized a couple of the pieces out of it, namely the dart and on the other side, the blade portion, as well as the knuckle pieces. So rather than creating them from scratch, I deconstructed that and then reconstructed a pleather and EVA foam bracer portion. The hard bits are made out of a combination of either EVA foam wrapped in pleather or warbler around EVA foam, then painted with gold acrylic. I have some rivet decorations, as well as some little buckle decorations and combinations of pleather and trimming to create the final look. So this one, instead of their version, this one actually fits my arm properly. And finally, I made some little elastic loops that can go around my fingers to help the whole thing stay in place. In case of going to conventions where they didn't want me to have the blade is actually a separate removable piece. So it's constructed on its own. It just allows me to slip it in when I want to actually be in the costume with the full getup. Thank you so much for watching my Evie Frye costume walkthrough video. I hope it's helped you figure out how to put this whole badass assassin together. If you have any other questions, please post them in the comments section below. You can also head over to my website, randomtuesday.net, for other patterns, tutorials, blog posts. Links are below. Thank you so much for your support, and if you haven't yet, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel or checking out some of the other videos that I have available to you. And lastly, and certainly not leastly, thank you to each and every one of my patrons over on Patreon. You have helped create this video and make it a reality. If you would like to support me in creating other cosplay resources and tutorials, please head over there, and a small monthly amount can help keep these videos coming. Thank you so much for watching.